she concealed that .357 Magnum behind her back, walked in to her own bedroom, and then fired 3 shots.
She ran into the backyard. I tried to follow her. She jumped the fence and ran. She shot me in the neck.
Carly Gregg and her mother Ashley always had an exceptionally strong bond. Even so, Carly had a challenging childhood. As a teenager, she began smoking marijuana to cope with anxiety and depression, and later her therapist put her on powerful antidepressants to quell the voices in her head. Her life was definitely headed in the wrong direction, and just when her mother found out how bad the problem actually was, Carly gunned her down in cold blood. Before we begin, we would like to express our sincerest condolences to Ashley's family for their loss. Carly's biological father had serious drug problems and allegedly suffered from a number of psychiatric conditions, including schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. Unsurprisingly, he and Carly's mother, Ashley, had a tumultuous and sometimes violent marriage. On more than one occasion, Carly remembered seeing cuts and bruises on her mother's arms, neck, and face after particularly heated altercations. Things eventually got so bad that Ashley took Carly and fled the home late one night. Carly's parents divorced shortly thereafter. She visited her father a couple of times a month, but she didn't enjoy their time together because his emotions ranged from distant and disinterested to downright angry. In addition, she often feared for her life when they were in the car together because he drove aggressively and erratically. Even as a child, Carly was terrified that she would end up just like him. After all, schizophrenia and bipolar disorder can be hereditary, and some families even have genetic predispositions to addictive personality disorder. This was a constant source of strife for Carly's mother as well, because she had lost an 18-month-old daughter years before. Carly was only 4 years old when her baby sister passed away, but she was devastated by her death. Even so, some remarked that she was a bright, driven, and charismatic child who was remarkably well adjusted considering what she had been through. By grade school, she was so far ahead of most of her classmates that administrators allowed her to skip the 3rd grade. Carly and Ashley eventually moved in with her second husband, Heath Smiley, in Brandon, Mississippi. Ashley and Heath hit it off immediately, and by all outward appearances, they all led relatively happy middle-class lives. That said, Carly was kicked out of the 7th grade for taking a Swiss Army knife to school. It was unclear what she intended to do with the knife, but it is possible that the incident was just an honest mistake that was blown way out of proportion. Either way, it eventually blew over, and a few years later, Carly began attending Northwest Rankin High School in Flowood, Mississippi, where her mother was a math teacher. Carly won the school's coveted Student of the Year award as a freshman in 2013, but by the following year, things had taken a turn for the worse. As a sophomore, Carly began vaping and smoking marijuana and talking to her friends on burner phones. Like many teenagers, she also dealt with emotional issues like depression and anxiety, and she turned to journaling as a way to clear her head and express her emotions. On one page, she wrote a list of most significant beliefs, the first of which was there was no God. Carly also wrote that heaven and hell didn't exist, that people could write their own destinies, and that she was fascinated by fire because it was so powerful, so beautiful, and so deadly. Nonetheless, some of her journal entries were even more chilling. One said, "You don't need a family." Another, "It's okay to be evil." Carly's mother didn't know about the drugs, the e-cigarettes, burner phones, and what she wrote in her journal. Even so, she knew her daughter was struggling, and she was alarmed when she cut off the long blonde hair that she had always cared so much about. Ashley even asked Carly to promise her that she wasn't trying to be a boy. The statement may have been made in a joking manner, but at least inwardly she may have been wondering whether her daughter was having an identity crisis. At the same time, Carly told one of her friends that the haircut made her look even more gay. Now, this doesn't prove that she was actually gay, but Ashley eventually got so worried about her daughter that she took her to see a therapist named Rebecca Kirk. Miss Kirk didn't think Carly was struggling with her sexuality. Carly was dealing with a number of potentially serious problems, but all things considered, Miss Kirk thought she was coping pretty well. Nonetheless, Carly began taking the antidepressant Zoloft, but she eventually switched to Lexapro when it failed to help her symptoms. By mid-March of 2024, one of Carly's friends was so worried about her that he asked another student to distract her at school so he could go to her mother's classroom and tell her that she was smoking marijuana and behaving strangely. On the morning of Tuesday, March the 19th, 2024, Carly and her friend got into a heated argument. She was so angry when she found out that he betrayed her trust that she cussed him out in front of a number of fellow students. Nonetheless, the rest of the school day passed without incident. And that afternoon, Carly and her mother left school together around 3:30 just like they did nearly every day. We'll never know if they chatted politely, argued, or simply drove along in silence, but Carly let their dogs out as if nothing had happened when they got home a few minutes before 4 p.m. While she was outside, her mother went into her bedroom to look for marijuana. She immediately found a number of vape pens that she took to her own room before returning to Carly's to continue the search. When Carly came back inside a few minutes later, she casually walked up to her mother's room, removed a loaded .357 Magnum from under her mattress, hid it behind her back, walked through the kitchen on the way to her own bedroom. A few seconds later, the unmistakable sound of a loud gunshot broke the otherwise peaceful afternoon, and sadly, it was followed by 2 screams and 2 additional gunshots. When Carly reappeared in the kitchen, she and the 2 dogs looked anxious and agitated as if something horrible had just happened. Almost immediately, Carly removed one of the home's security cameras and hid it in the refrigerator, and over the next 45 minutes, she texted at least 5 of her friends. She also used her mom's phone to text her stepfather, Heath Smiley. The message asked when he would be home, and Carly even used the word honey to make it look like her mother Ashley had sent it. One of the friends Carly texted arrived at the home shortly thereafter. As soon as she walked in, Carly asked if she had ever seen a dead body and took her to the bedroom. There, before them, her mother Ashley was laid out on the floor with her arms crossed over her chest and a cloth draped over her face. At that point, Carly allegedly told her friend that there were 3 rounds left in the .357 and she was saving them for her stepfather, Heath Smiley. Carly's friend panicked and ran from the home, and Heath Smiley pulled into the driveway a few minutes later, oblivious to what had just taken place inside his peaceful home. Carly appeared as soon as he walked through the door. He was instantly startled by her wide eyes and crazed look. Another gunshot rang out. Heath immediately backpedaled away and tried to wrestle the gun from his stepdaughter's hand. To his surprise, she never fired a second shot. Instead, she screamed and ran through the kitchen, slipping out the back door and disappearing into a forested area with her friend who was in the backyard during the altercation with Heath Smiley. Thankfully, the bullet only nicked Heath's shoulder, and he was able to call 911.
Calm down. What's your name? Heath Smiley. Okay, calm down for me. Give me your name again. Heath Smiley. Heath Smiley? Yes, sir. All right, mister, what's your phone number you calling me from? Did she hit you? Yeah, I got hit in the neck a little bit. Okay, so she grazed your neck? Yes, sir. All right, and what's her name? Carly Gregg. Carly Gregg? Does she still have a gun on her? I took it from her. She ran. You took it from her and she ran? Yes, sir. She was screaming, something at me I couldn't understand. I locked the door. She's outside. I don't know what's going on. Which way did she run off to? She ran into the backyard and went over a fence. Ran into the backyard and went over your fence? Yeah. What is she wearing? T-shirt, gray shirt and some jeans. Gray shirt and jeans? About how tall is she? 5'2". About 5'2"? What color hair? Brownish. Brownish, just short hair. 5'2" with back door, she opened fire on me. And was just screaming. Okay, just calm down for me. We got everybody in. She what? She killed her mom. She killed her mom? Yeah, that's what I'm screaming about. Where's the mom? When I do this, she's going to kill me. Where's the mom at?
Franklin County Deputy Hunter Lewis was the first to arrive on the scene. After opening the door, Heath collapsed onto the front porch.
She ran into the backyard. I tried to follow her. She jumped the fence and ran. She shot me in the neck. It's okay.
Does she still have the gun?
It's on the kitchen counter. I think there's one live round left in it. I opened the cylinder. I went in the back door. She tried to shoot me.
Hey, I need some gloves. What's her name?
Carly Gregg.
Carly Gregg? How old is she?
14. She'll be 15 next month.
Okay.
He told Deputy Lewis that Carly had left the gun on the kitchen table and fled, but he didn't have any idea where she went. Additional officers and EMTs began arriving at the home almost immediately, and in less than a minute, they discovered Ashley's body in Carly's room. By then, she was already dead, and to their surprise, they found 2 gunshot wounds to her face and another under the chin when they had removed the cloth that Carly had placed over her face.
That's mom. That's mom. Yeah. Yeah. No, mom and dad both got it.
Mom and dad both what?
Got hit.
Okay. And
Dad's got her through and through in the shoulder. He's already in the ambulance.
Was it the 14-year-old?
Yeah, the 14-year-old.
Where is that?
Yeah.
I found that out on the way here. Yeah. It's 40 years old.
Officers found additional guns while they were searching and securing the home, and at that point, they didn't even know if Carly had come back or whether she had taken another weapon. They eventually secured the scene, and Heath Smiley was taken away in an ambulance shortly thereafter. And later that afternoon, Carly was found less than a mile from the home and was taken into custody.
Handcuffed. Actually, look. Let me step out real quick for me. Alright. Hey, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna move them around to the front of you, okay? I'm gonna move the handcuffs around to the front of you. Okay. Alright. Alright, so what we're gonna do here is we're gonna swab your hands, okay? Right. Now, I'll ask you a bunch of questions, but obviously you fired with a pistol, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Alright, look. I need you to hold your hand out like this. I'm going to do your right hand first, okay? That's your right hand. Keep it like that.
Swab up here.
What is this?
It's a GSLR. It shows which hand did you shoot with?
Okay.
Which hand did you shoot with?
Alright, I'm gonna go up.
Flop the hand, turn the hand over.
Turn it over.
And rub on the outside part around the knuckles.
Where do you want, where do you want kids from?
I guess you can put it in my vehicle with my key. The key fob is in my left pocket.
Alright, now so go ahead and take it. Alright.
Is my stepdad okay?
I don't know, baby. I can't talk to you about
Oh,
this.
here, I'm just...
Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Carly was a minor at that time, but prosecutors charged her with one count of first-degree murder and another count of attempted murder. During the preliminary hearing, her attorney asked Judge David Morrow for a low bond on the grounds that she was a good student with no prior arrests. Carly's attorney also told the court that she was scheduled to undergo a comprehensive mental health evaluation and that she wasn't a threat to herself or anyone else. But unsurprisingly, Judge Morrow disagreed. He said that the alleged crimes were so heinous that they may have been premeditated and that Carly posed a threat to the community. Judge Morrow conceded that there was probably a mental health aspect to the case that could come out in the trial, but he ultimately set her bond at $1 million and Carly remained in custody. Before Carly's first day in court, state prosecutors presented her defense team with a 40-year plea deal. If they took it, Carly would spend 4 decades in prison. But on the bright side, she eventually could get out if she lived long enough. On the other hand, her attorneys had to weigh the offer against the likelihood of her getting a lighter sentence or perhaps even being acquitted if she went to trial. After careful consideration, they decided to roll the dice in hope that the jury would go easy on Carly because she was a minor with a troubled past. With this in mind, the defense would have to convince the jury that Carly loved her mother, that the alleged crimes were not premeditated, and that she was mentally ill when they were committed. To these ends, they'd rely on testimony about her early relationship with her mother, her dark journal entries, and the results of the mental evaluation carried out by a psychiatrist. With Judge Dewey K. Arthur presiding, the trial finally began on the morning of Monday, September the 16th, 2024, less than a year after Ashley's death. The atmosphere in the courtroom was tense and emotional from the very beginning, largely because Ashley's parents and her husband, Heath Smiley, were all in the gallery. As baffling as it was to some of the other attendees, they were there to support Carly even though she had been charged with killing Ashley and attempting to kill Heath. During opening statements, State Prosecutor Catherine White Newman told the judge and the jury that the shootings occurred just hours after Ashley found out that Carly had been smoking marijuana. The implication was that she was a spoiled brat who had killed her mother because she was about to take her illegal drugs away. Next, Miss White Newman painstakingly recounted nearly every detail of the alleged crimes as Carly looked on from the defense table.
We're here because on March the 19th, 2024, Carly rode to school with her mother that day. Ashley was a school teacher at Northwest Rankin, taught geometry. Carly was in the 10th grade. You'll hear that morning she got in a little altercation with one of her friends, cussed him out. But what you'll hear, ladies and gentlemen, from the testimony of this friend is that he was so worried about Carly's use of smoking marijuana, and so worried about her being high, and so worried about her having these burner phones that her mom didn't know about, that he felt compelled to tell Miss Ashley Smiley that day. Ladies and gentlemen, after the incident with Carly that morning, you'll hear that he gets in touch with another friend and he's like, hey, you got to keep her distracted so I can go tell Miss Smiley what's going on. Ladies and gentlemen, this friend cared about Carly. He was like, I gotta intervene. I gotta tell her. I'm afraid of what's happening. You'll hear from him that he did in fact tell Miss Smiley. That after 4th block that day, he goes and he tells Miss Smiley, hey, Carly has got these vapes. She's got this phone. Ladies and gentlemen, you'll hear then that Carly Gregg rides in the car home with her mother from school to their house. They leave school sometime after 3:30. They get home a little before 4. You'll hear that when they get inside the house, it's only their 2 dogs, Ashley Smiley and Carly Gregg. Immediately, Carly goes and lets the dogs out. You'll hear testimony that Ashley then goes into Carly's room. You'll hear that while Ashley is in her room, that Carly's still outside. At some point, Ashley finds what law enforcement believe to be the 4 boxes that contain vape pens. Testimony will be that we believe she carried them from Carly's room to her bedroom, went back to search in Carly's room. The evidence will show that almost immediately upon Carly coming inside the house, that she walks straight to her parents' bedroom, that she goes straight to her mom's side of the bed and removes a .357 Magnum from under the mattress. We believe the testimony will be that then she concealed that .357 Magnum behind her back. As she walked through the kitchen, she peeks her head around. We believe the testimony will show that she peeks her head around the kitchen to make sure that her mom hasn't come out of her bedroom. We believe the evidence will then show that she walked with that .357 Magnum behind her back, walked in to her own bedroom, and then fired 3 shots into her mother, killing her.
When it was the defense team's turn, Carly's attorney stated that she was mentally ill and was just as much a victim as her mother Ashley and her stepfather Heath. She also told the jury how close Carly and Ashley had always been and that she was an exceptionally good student who regularly went out of her way to please her mother and stepfather.
We believe the evidence will show that there were 3 victims on March 19th. Ashley Smiley, Heath Smiley, and Carly Smiley. And Carly Gregg. That they were all 3 victims. We believe the evidence will show that Carly had been suffering from a mental illness, that Carly was not aware on March 19th that she had a mental illness. We believe the evidence will show that Carly's parents, who lived with her, were not aware that Carly was suffering from a mental illness. We believe the evidence will show that Carly's close friends, who saw her at school every day, were not aware that Carly was suffering from a mental illness, because it's hard to look at a person and understand that they have a mental illness. It's hard to look at a person and know that they have a mental illness. That's why it's often referred to as the invisible disease. A person can exhibit symptoms of a mental illness without people necessarily knowing that they have one, or other people necessarily knowing that's what another person has. While the events on March 19th were tragic, the events on March 19th were not intentional. The evidence will show, and the testimony will show, that Carly Gregg loved her mother. That Carly Gregg and her mother had a loving, close relationship. Carly Gregg's mom loved her. In fact, her life revolved around Carly, as parents' lives often do revolve around their children. Carly very much wanted to please her mother. Carly was an exceptional student, made a 30 on the ACT when she was 13 years old. She was the apple of her mother and her stepfather's eye. And you will understand by the conclusion of this hearing why Carly's stepfather is still supporting her and standing behind her. Because he knows on March 19th, there were 3 victims.
Before any witnesses were called to testify, the prosecution played the audio of the 911 call Heath Smiley had made that fateful day. During the 3-minute recording, Carly closed her eyes and put her hands over her ears as if she couldn't bear to hear it.
Okay, just calm down for me. We got everybody headed for the She what? She killed her mom. She killed her mom? Yeah, that's what I'm screaming about. Where's the mom? Mom, when I do that, she tried to kill me. Where's the mom?
Next, Carly's therapist, Rebecca Kirk, took the stand. This was important testimony because Miss Kirk had a number of sessions with Carly, the last of which took place the day before she allegedly murdered her mother. However, she said that she never saw any indication that Carly was or homicidal, that she rarely seemed more than a little melancholy.
And you state in your last session with me, she appeared emotionally stable and she had no or homicidal feelings suspected by me nor spoken by her. So I want to ask you about that. You said that she didn't tell you about any feelings, but you didn't think that there was anything like that going on either.
No, that's correct.
And then you also noted that she did not indicate that our week was negatively affecting her.
Correct.
What did you mean by that?
Well, anytime that a person's prescription meds change, you need them to be very concerned about side effects, feelings of things of that sort. And so I wanted to follow up and make sure she wasn't experiencing any negative reactions regarding that.
You also said that, nor did she appear different from any other sessions, nor emotionally unstable or dysregulated. Can you talk about what that means?
Yes, just kind of basically what we said, that was on the first part of each of my sessions. Like, she seemed very oriented to time and space and didn't seem to have erratic speech, loud speech, to be overly angry or overly happy, just, a normal situation observance of her.
And then you go on to say she did not appear melancholy nor zoned out emotionally. Can you talk about what you meant there?
Yeah, she had reported several times that, at least one time maybe, but I feel like I maybe wrote it more than once, I'm not sure, that with some of the Zoloft she felt like a zombie. And so, she never really appeared that way to me ever, but she had reported it, so I put it in my notes when that had occurred. But I was saying here that I didn't notice any of it as well.
And you talked about how you had gone through conflict management with Carly on the day before the incident.
Correct.
I think you also talked about kind of what you observed between Carly and Ashley's relationship. Can you talk about why you thought that was important to put in your record?
Yes, sure. Well, ordinarily termination of care is in a very different manner, and I knew that this one was a very sad act that occurred, and I wanted to be clear that I did not ever observe them together other than in the waiting room, and I never really saw, anything that would allude me to believe that, or hint at any kind of very severe danger or threat.
At any point during your treatment in sessions with Carly, did you think that she was being physically abused by anyone?
No, never. In fact, I asked several times about the stepdad, and I'm very confident in her response, verbally and non-verbally, that it felt very much to me like that nobody that she was living with had been abusing her. Now, her biological father, yes.
And she described some incidents where he had been physical with Ashley as well. Mm-hmm. And then what about, I didn't see any note of this, but did she at any point ever report that she had been by anyone?
No, she told me she had not.
Court's indulgence. No further questions, Your Honor.
After Miss Kirk's testimony, the prosecution addressed Carly's journals, which were another huge point of contention between the opposing sides. Prosecutor White Newman showed the jury a number of journal entries and read the following aloud: "You don't need a family," and "It's okay to be evil." According to the prosecution, that went a long way towards establishing both malice and intent. This was a particularly pivotal moment because if the jury agreed, they couldn't find Carly not guilty by reason of insanity. On the other hand, her defense team argued that the entries proved that Carly was struggling with mental health issues. Nobody knew how the jury interpreted those journal entries, but Carly's stepfather, Heath Smiley, was called to the stand shortly thereafter. He calmly told the judge and jury that Carly was always the most important thing in Ashley's life.
How much did Ashley love Carly?
They loved each other so much. She just, everything she did, she planned out for Carly and around Carly.
Tell us about yours and Carly's relationship before March 19, 2024.
We were always good. We laughed and played and messed around, loved video games, and took her to karate stuff until she kind of got tired of that, and she started going to guitar practice weekly, so I was taking her to that every week. We got along great.
You liked being a stepdad?
Yes.
Sometimes with children comes discipline, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Would you say, or how would you describe the type of parent that Ashley was to Carly?
She was, like I said, always thinking about Carly and just Carly's first no matter what. She would do anything in the world for her and would try to get the best for her every day.
Were there times that you and Ashley would have to punish Carly?
Of course.
Give us some examples of that, Heath.
She had troubles growing up with back and forth with the stepdad and everything, so she would always wanting to try to make friends at the house and around home.
Tell the ladies and gentlemen exactly what you remember about when you came home on March the 19th, 2024.
Everything seemed pretty normal, and came on in, and when I opened the door to the kitchen there, gun went off in my face before the door was, 3 or 4 inches wide open. And everything kind of went pretty fast from there. It was a blur, gun flash in my face, and then it went off 2 more times, but my hand was on the gun after the first shot, and I twisted it from her.
Who was pointing that gun at you?
It was Carly.
Who pulled the trigger when you opened the door?
The first one I know was Carly. After that, my hand was on the gun too, and I know I had a scratch on my thumb and all. I very well could have hit it, I know, that third time.
Did you ever get struck by a bullet?
Yes, one of them kind of grazed right through this muscle up here.
Heath did not pull any punches or omit any details when he was asked about the events leading up to his wife's death. He even gave a graphic description of the manner in which he found Ashley's dead body.
Checked her bedroom, bathroom, closet, other side of the bed, under the desk in there, and turned and started going towards the other end of the house, and I glanced in our spare little third bedroom, and then turned and went into Carly's room, and that's where I found Ashley.
when you found Ashley, can you tell the ladies and gentlemen what you saw?
She was laying on her back and had her hands kind of across her, and a towel over her face.
Even so, it was clear from his demeanor that he was just providing accurate testimony under oath and that he bore no ill will toward Carly, who he apparently loved as if she were his own biological daughter. At one point, he even looked at her and mouthed the words, "I love you." Later, on the third day of the trial, the defense called psychiatrist Dr. Andrew Clark, who they hired before the trial to interview Carly, to review her medical record, and to determine whether or not she had a bona fide mental condition. He began by testifying about Carly's mental state in the weeks and days leading up to her mother's death.
Her mood was flat, that she was zombie, that she was still quite depressed, she was still cutting. She also reported that the voices were getting worse, that they were becoming more urgent, more prominent, and she was beginning to worry that they were taking over for her. Now, she told me that the only thing the voices said to her were things that were kind of elitist, like, you're better than those people. Like, that's the only thing she told me they said. So her mood is poor, the voices are getting worse, her sleep continues to be bad, and she's smoking marijuana on 2 or 3 times a week. She also reported that she had a fair amount of anxiety during this time as well.
Okay. Your Honor, may I approach?
Dr. Clark, when did you first receive the Vital Core records?
So I received the Vital Core records, or the records from the Rankin County Correctional Facility for her psychiatric treatment and medication. And I didn't receive them until I had already interviewed Carly.
According to Dr. Clark, she suffered from depression and anxiety and regularly heard auditory hallucinations, or as they're more commonly known, voices inside her head. To back up his testimony, he pointed to a journal entry Carly made on March the 12th of 2024, in which she claimed to have had a loud conversation with one of the voices that led to a psychotic break.
Now, are auditory hallucinations or hearing voices typically what someone with bipolar II disorder is going to be experiencing?
No. The short answer is no. It's not usual for someone with bipolar II disorder to hear voices. Sometimes people that get very depressed can experience auditory hallucinations, hear voices along with that. People that are manic can absolutely experience auditory hallucinations. They can become very psychotic, but otherwise it's really not at all common.
And based on what you reviewed in preparing for your evaluation of Carly, were there any indications in any documents where Carly had reported hearing voices prior to March 19th?
Yes.
Okay. Where?
So the document in particular was her journal entry from March 12th of 2024, 1 week before the incident.
Okay. Your Honor, may I approach? We put Carly's journal into evidence. I'll just hand you that copy of it. Now, you mentioned a journal entry from March 12th?
Correct.
Okay. And is that the journal entry that I've handed you there?
It is.
Is that the same journal entry that you reviewed?
Yes.
Okay. And can you tell me what about that journal entry stood out to you in your review?
Would you like for me to read it?
Yes.
So Carly had kept a journal. It looked like it began in January of 2024, just after after she'd been found by her mother to have been engaging in these behaviors. She kept the journal through much of January and then dropped off. And then this, as I recall, was the only entry in March. So writing on March 12th, Tuesday, she writes, "I think I had a psychotic break earlier. The whole ordeal was quite silly. I actually spoke with one of the voices in my head. Well, I didn't hear them until earlier today, but I only do then. My particular friend and I were practically screaming, bloodthirstily and ravenously. Thank God, physical confrontation was not, and I think it's fruitively, possible. I sound crazy. And then she goes on to say, I need to get back into the habit of journaling, that think it's good. I haven't quite decided if I'll bring this stupid thing to Mrs. Kirk, her therapist, tomorrow, but I can't decide! Exclamation mark.
Dr. Clark also claimed that Carly had an eating and sleeping disorder and that she intentionally cut herself, that she smoked marijuana nearly every day, and that the abrupt switch from Zoloft to Lexapro the week before her mother's death had caused horrible mood swings. In the end, he diagnosed her with bipolar II disorder. To the jury, Dr. Clark's testimony seemed to indicate that Carly was not responsible for her actions. However, the prosecution's final witness painted a very different picture of her mental faculties. Forensic psychiatrist Dr. Jason Pickett suggested that the journal entries may have been made in what he described as theatrical reasons. He also read one of the entries Carly had made about hearing voices. It was definitely shocking to hear, but as he pointed out, Carly never mentioned hearing voices to her therapist or anyone other than Dr. Clark before or after her mother's death. He even claimed that she was diabolical and narcissistic, and that she never had bipolar disorder, and that she was perfectly sane and knew exactly what she was doing when she shot her mother. During closing arguments at the end of the 5-day trial, prosecutor Catherine White Newman admitted that Carly looked like a sweet young girl. However, she told the jury that Carly was actually very dangerous. And to prove her point, she once again read the 2 damning entries that Carly had made in her journal. You don't need family, and it's okay to be evil. As such, Miss White Newman only asked the jury to sentence her to life in prison, but she also asked that they made sure that she was never eligible for parole.
I want you to look at her journals. There's a page back there that says, "What do I believe?" There's no God, heaven and hell are false. You writing your own destiny. And these 2 stand out to me, ladies and gentlemen. She told us what her intent was. You don't need family, and it's okay to be evil. There's another one I want you to look at. Dr. Pickett talked about it. She wrote, water, fire, earth. Water, fire, earth. She circles fire, ladies and gentlemen, and she wrote, these are Carly Gregg's own words. Miss Todd stated when we got started the other day, what's better, watching a video of what happened or hearing somebody talk about it? Well, I submit to you, we have all of the above in this case. We got to, unfortunately, watch a video of what happened. We've seen photos of what happened. We have audio of what happened. We have the defendant's journals and text messages telling us what happened. She says, I choose fire. It is powerful, beautiful, and deadly. These are the traits I desire, so I choose fire. Ladies and gentlemen, that lady right there chose fire. She chose to murder her mother, tried to kill her stepdad, and then tried to cover it up. We ask that when you go back to the jury room, that you'll look at all the evidence, that you'll consider the testimony that you've heard, that you will not be misled or confused by the fact that the defendant tries to put a burden on the state that does not exist. We do not have to prove the why. We will likely never know the why, but we know that Carly Gregg is guilty of murder, attempted murder, and tampering with physical evidence, and we ask you to find the same. Thank you.
During the surprisingly short trial, Carly's emotions ranged from stoic and disinterested to anguished and distraught. She broke down once again during closing arguments when she realized she might have to spend the rest of her life in state prison. On Friday, September the 20th, 2024, the Rankin County, Mississippi jury entered the courtroom and found 15-year-old Carly Gregg guilty of first-degree murder in the death of her mother, attempted murder for shooting her stepfather, Heath Smiley, and tampering with evidence for removing a home security camera after the crimes were committed. As per the prosecution's request, she was sentenced to 2 concurrent life sentences and 10 additional years for tampering with evidence all without the possibility of parole. Carly broke down as the verdict was read, and by then she and her attorneys were likely thinking back to the 40-year plea deal they had turned down months before. Meanwhile, her maternal grandparents and her stepfather, Heath Smiley, looked on in obvious disbelief. Carly eventually became so emotional that bailiffs had to remove her from the courtroom, but when she returned, she was smiling as if nothing had happened. After the trial, Rankin County District Attorney Bubba Bramlett told the press that Carly was evil, and that, as hard as it was to say, sometimes evil can come in young packages.